Hi everyone, how's it going? So I noticed that it's been like damn near 3 weeks since I put out that introductory video to my new series that I'm starting on my channel called Movies That I Watched on a Plane. And I'm wearing earplugs, by the way, so I'm sorry if I sound like I'm yelling. It's just because my neighbor has her washing machine on or something. I think it's her washing machine. It's like this constant rolling drum noise and it's driving me crazy. So, sorry if I'm yelling. I'm going to try to talk at a normal volume, but I might forget about it as I get really into my review. So, okay. So let's start with, well, first of all, let me just preface this by saying that I was never a huge fan of the Toy Story franchise. I remember watching it once, very vaguely. I don't even think it was at my own house. It was probably at a friend's house. Why do I feel like I can't speak all of a sudden with earplugs on or earplugs in? But anyway, yeah, I watched Toy Story like once. I barely remember the plot. Um, all I know is that Sid, the kid next door, was like a bad kid, and he had this den full of disfigured, disformed toys made of, all different parts from other toys. I'm just thinking of that one toy with the legs and then some sort of crane in between. It was actually pretty grotesque and kind of dark, and I feel like maybe that's kind of sort of a kind of theme throughout a lot of the Toy Story movies. Now, just as much as I don't remember much of what happened in the first movie, I barely remember seeing the second and third movies. I think I did at one point, or at least I saw parts of the third movie. I remember something taking place on a runway, like it was some huge chase down involving a plane and Woody was hanging onto the wheels for dear life, something like that. But anyway, all of this to say that I am not a huge I'm not a Toy Story stan. So I don't have the benefit of that nostalgia and yeah, just like the warm feelings towards this movie franchise that a lot of the people who have been anticipating this fourth installment might have. So please don't take things personally as if I'm like bashing your favorite movie or anything like that. I'm not trying to bash anything. I'm just trying to give my thoughts on it and how I walked away from the movie feeling pretty a lot of things. Maybe we should just get into the movie itself. So first of all, I don't know, do I need to give a synopsis? I guess I'll give a tiny summary. I had to refresh my memory on Wikipedia, honestly, because I forgot like half of the plot. That's how unmemorable it was to me. But so basically, I think we're like 10 or so years into the future. Andy is now an adult or in his late teens, and he's elected to donate his box of toys. Um, the whole gang, Woody, Mr. Potato Head, who's that cowboy girl, Jessie. All of them are being donated by Andy to a new little girl named Bonnie. And this is kind of like the, not a rebirth, but the resetting of the cycle, right? This is what toys do. They fulfill their duty um, during the childhood of one kid, and then hopefully as they get older, or as the toys themselves don't get older, but as time passes on, they get hopefully handed off to a new child, and that's supposed to be like their whole purpose and meaning in life is to fulfill these children and be there for them and help them develop things like that. So that brings me to my first point of contention with this movie is the fact of this idea of loyalty without reciprocity being pushed so hard in this movie. I really don't like that. I feel like it's not a good message to be sending kids. Just the way that Woody is so blindly devoted to what he feels is his duty and his role as the toy, one of the main toys in Bonnie's life, even though she doesn't even pay attention to him. It seems like she forgets about his existence for 90% of the movie. So you have to wonder, like, at what point does this ride or die mindset? Woody is like one of those ride or die chicks that will do anything for their man, even if he like goes to jail 100 times and screws her over financially, screws her entire family over. He's like one of those people that thinks, oh, ride or die above anything else, which I feel like it's just not. I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to that ideology. I feel like it's a mutual support type of thing. Like if you it's a contract, right? Any type of relationship that you have with people. So I just don't like the idea. And again, this is not something new per se that has been introduced in Toy Story 4. I mean, it's kind of what the whole series is built on as a premise is that these toys are there to fulfill their role to their kids, and they're supposed to do it very selflessly. And there inevitably comes it's a sad but accepted part of life that there inevitably comes a point where they either get discarded or they're forgotten about. And I find that whole I don't know, I just think it's very dark. Like, has anyone else noticed how dark and hopeless that type of a foundation for basically in the entire series? Um, it just seems like a very dark, nihilistic thing to be basing a children's series on, and it makes me wonder, like, how much of that ideology has unconsciously impacted the kids that have been so invested in the movie since they were little. Again, like I said, I was not one of those kids. I watched it in passing at a friend's house, but that was about the extent of my interaction with the movie. I didn't feel it's weird that well, I don't know if I should get into this tangent, but because I don't really know the reason why, I just did not feel personally connected with the story despite having I actually owned a few of the toys. I mean, I definitely owned a Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, and I never owned any of the like the actual Toy Story toys, like the Disney licensed Toy Story toys. I never owned any of those because I never felt a desire for those. But I had the potato heads and I had my own stuffed animals and things like that. And I had very active play sessions with them. I had a very active imagination. I would engage I mostly had stuffed animals, but they would be engaged in a lot of melodramas with each other, and I would pretend to be their voices and things like that. This was yeah, I think every kid does this when they're young. Every imaginative kid, anyway. But yeah, even though I had the potato heads, I never felt any type of personal connection to Toy Story, and I'm inclined to think that it's because of the fact that was did not grow up as having like a white Caucasian experience in America. Not that that's anything that's explicitly brought to the forefront or emphasized in the movie, but I just feel like there was always a very definite sense to me as I was watching the movie that oh, this is about typical white all-American boy in the suburbs of America. This story is not about me. So, and I think that obviously the creators or the writers, whoever caught on to that, and that's why it does feel forced and obvious, but I'm not going to complain about it because I do think it's a good thing that they brought in, like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the main character, the main girl in the fourth movie, Bonnie, seems to be like Mexican or Latina, and the girl at the end, that the Annabelle looking doll, I dead ass can't remember her name, but the one that was trying to steal Woody's voice box, she ends up going to a little black girl. So that's kind of like a very obvious move on Disney's part to include more of the like invite, I guess, minorities into their narrative, or like invite my what am I trying to say? Invite minority children into the participation of um like sharing in the emotions and the love for this story. And like I'm sorry, but to me it's like too little, too late. I don't really it's still a very white story to me. So anyway, so that's my first issue. If we can circle back to the point that I was trying to make about loyalty without reciprocity being something that's very dangerous to push onto children, and I feel like it's very easy to overlook that in this movie in particular because the main protagonist that we're focused on is Woody, who is a male toy within the confines of that universe. He's very clearly identified as like a male protagonist. So you don't usually see like usually when you see that type of a ride or die mentality that sort of drives a character to ruin, it happens to a female character. So it's easier to like it's a more common pattern. It's tragic pattern, but more commonly seen in actual society and reality. But in this case, we have Woody, who is the male toy. He's the one that is really like clinging onto this this idea that he needs to be this martyr for Bonnie even though she doesn't even know he's alive. He feels like it's his responsibility to ensure her happiness and all that stuff. And in they tried to make it kind of refreshing, I guess, to have Bo Peep be his foil in this story. She's the one that decides that she doesn't want any more of this life. Um, this constant cycle of heartbreak, like getting your hopes up and but knowing getting your hopes up with every new kid that you're assigned to, but then always knowing that at the end of the tunnel, there's nothing waiting for you but heartache and abandonment, all those things that, she doesn't feel that that's what she deserves. So this is my interpretation. That's why she decided to become a free toy, or I don't know what is the term that they used in the movie. A free toy, right? Like a free agent, childless toy. I don't think it was childless toy. Hold on, I'm looking this up. Oh, a lost toy. Yes, that's what they refer to those toys as. So, yeah, I mean, they switched the typical gender roles there, which it doesn't really matter though because it's the same thing though. It's like this battling of the two ideologies. One is that you should be loyal at all costs, even if your loyalty is not appreciated. You need to see your responsibility that you were put on this earth to do to the end. And the other is like, well, what's in it for me? What is the merit to that? What are the like? Who's to say that if I do that, that's what defines me as being a good person or someone who has morals? You know, why is it bad for me to choose myself over something like that? Okay, so yeah, that was my like one of my huge issues with the story. Morality wise, is that the term I want to use? Or I guess message wise, even though Woody does eventually get convinced by Bo Peep and the others to become a lost toy himself, because he's about to go to the vet. This is the thing, though. He doesn't. I didn't get the feeling that he did it out of his own volition. I feel like every, yeah, every like his conversion to the other side, so to speak, every step of it had to really be driven by either Bo Peep or the other toys. Like he needed to be strong-handed into rejecting rejecting his first initial decision to stay with the other toys and with Bonnie. And he would not have chose out of his own will to go with Bo Peep unless the other people, unless the other toys in his life pushed him towards that direction, which I feel like was ultimately the right direction. But it just bothers me that it seems like Woody never came to that realization on his own that he's worth more than to just be an invisible toy who is bringing all of these benefits to this little girl's life, but getting zero. Not only does he get zero credit for it because she doesn't notice him throughout the entire movie, she doesn't even notice that he's left at the end when he goes with Bo Peep. But not only that, he allows himself like over and over. It's deeper at a deeper level. It's allowing yourself to be discounted and disrespected over and over again. And I just feel like that's a very, very bad message to send to any kid, regardless of gender. So let's move to my second point because I'm not trying to make this an hour long. Forky. Forky, Forky, Forky. First of all, isn't he supposed to be a spork? Funnily enough, I have a surplus of sporks now because I've gotten into the very bad habit of ordering Uber Eats from this really delicious, authentic Thai place near my house. The minute that I discovered Uber Eats had arrived in my area, I immediately proceeded to order Thai curry, green curry, my favorite, from that place for 3 days out of the week at least. And every time that I order curry, they give me a bunch of sporks because, well, it's a useful tool. It's a hybrid between a fork and a spoon, both of which you need in order to eat curry successfully. So anyway, why is so if Forky is made out of a spork, first of all, why is he not called Sporky? Like because he's not a fork, he's a spork. So that's number one. Number two, this is kind of where I sort of lost myself. Like my focus on the movie was entirely derailed after that huge definitive incident of the creation of Forky by Bonnie, right? So, okay, where do I start with this? So Bonnie is at school. Woody decides to sneak into Bonnie's backpack and follow her to school because it seems like, I don't know if they've moved to a new place or she's just starting school for the first time, but either way, it's a new environment for her. She doesn't want to be there. I think she's just starting school because I think she's like a very, very young girl. So it's like, it's maybe her first year of preschool. It's her first time being away from her parents for the entire day. And so the toys, I guess, can gather from her first few days from her her attitude and her mood at home after those first few days experiencing school. I think the toys can gather that her mood is not it's a little bit down and she's obviously struggling in this new environment and this new experience. So in order to try and help her, because he sees it as his duty, even though he's been demoted, because he remember when he was with Andy, he used to be like the sheriff, or I don't know what they call, like the head toy, right? The one that rounds all the others up when it's time for playtime. He is no longer in that position when he's with Bonnie because he's not her favorite toy. So I just don't understand like why, like, come on, Woody, you don't owe that bitch anything. But anyway, he thinks that he does, so he follows her to school and to see if he can help her with any of her issues that she's having, and he witnesses firsthand like the struggles that she's having. She's not making very many friends. When the teacher announces that it's time to do arts and crafts, all of the other kids in the class kind of pair together in their own tables, and Bonnie is sort of left alone at her own table. Nobody wants to sit with her. Nobody wants to play with her. And on top of it, nobody wants to share any supplies with her. So Woody, being the hero that he is, decides to grab a couple of supplies from the trash bin next to her and proceeds to throw it in front of her, in her line of vision, on top of the table that she's sitting at when she's not looking. And so when she glances back, she sees, oh, there's like a bunch of trash essentially, but materials that she can use to start doing her own arts and crafts. So this is where she creates Forky, right? Which is essentially like I don't know why he's called Forky. He's a spork. I'm gonna call him Sporky, even though it's more of a tongue twister. But yeah, he's Sporky as far as I'm concerned from now on. Okay, I'll call him Forky. So it's like a fork, and she essentially glues two eyes and something for a mouth, and then like this little, oh my god, what's it called? The pipe cleaners. She uses that to make his arms. And so at this creature, this makeshift toy that she created, what do you know? It comes to life, and she immediately falls in love with this toy, right? Because it's something that she's created. So she feels like, oh, okay, so now this is my favorite toy, and she won't go anywhere without it. So she brings the toy home, and then the look of like just sheer worry and like, oh shit, oh snap, look at what has happened now. What are we going to do about this? That's the look that you see on Woody and the other toys' face when they realize that this fork trash, essentially like this thing made out of pieces, random pieces of trash, is actually sentient and it has a mind of its own. And for me, when I saw that scene where Woody introduced Forky to the rest of the toys, I 100% thought that it was going to take a much darker direction than the movie ended up actually taking. So I thought that it was kind of a Pandora's box situation. Like Woody now has to contend with the fact that his actions, like his decision to break the rules to follow Bonnie to school, has now, um, throughout a sequence of events, a lot of them which are driven directly by him, it's now resulted in the creation of this like essentially bastard being, right? It's like this sentient, half trash, half toy being. And I honestly thought like, I was like, oh shit, I did not know that they were gonna go there, right? Like to me, that's a very, I don't know exactly. I'm sure there's a more impressive philosophical term for it, but to me, that was like, I thought that that was going to be um, the main purpose of the movie, right? Is to try to figure out like, what are we gonna do with this monster that we've created, essentially? Because, and this is another thing that it bothered me throughout the whole movie because um so first of all, like the movie does not go in that direction. Obviously, I thought that it was going to be, I was actually getting ready to be really impressed because to me like that idea of doing something that you're not supposed to, and then it results in, it's not like an accident or some sort of like, it's not like she scratches her knee or she gets her feelings hurt, something like that, like a one-time incident that can be easily overcome. It's like this literally resulted in the creation of another being, and that you don't know how to classify because the being itself, Forky, who's a Spork, he himself does not recognize him as a toy. He spends the first half of the movie trying to hurl himself into the trash can because in his mind he's like, hey, I'm trash, that's where I belong. So like, why are all these toys trying to like continuously trying to drag me out of my fate, essentially, to be trash? And like, why am I being forced into this new role of toy when that's not what I am? So it's not dark in the way that, like, it's not obviously it's not violent or disturbing in the way that children cannot take visually, but as a subject matter, to me personally, it just seemed like really really macabre, and like um that's a grotesque theme to explore, right? So I was really shocked when I saw that. And I 100% interpreted the expression on Woody and the other toys' faces. I interpreted that as like, this is the issue that we're going to be dealing with throughout the whole movie. And it turned out to be completely not the case. So that's why I think I was like thrown off very early on in the movie because I kept kind of expecting that I I kind of expected them to explore that theme a little bit further, even just peripherally, because I know that like, part of me knew that you can't really get too far into that type of a grotesque um you can't really explore that subject matter too deeply in a children's film. But I thought that it would like it turned out that I don't know, maybe I'm just completely wrong. I have a feeling that that was sort of the direction that maybe the original writers and animators wanted to go, but probably they had to water it down or sanitize it for PG audiences. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, let me know if you agree or disagree with me. I'm not a film critic, so maybe I was just completely off base, and maybe I am just trying to find the darkness in everything. I don't know. But in any case, it calls to question, like for me, something that is, and I guess this is something that, if you really think about it, this question has been posed and left unanswered ever since the beginning of Toy Story 1, which is, and the question is, who, like, what decides whether or not something can become a toy or not? Like, what's the entity or the stamp of approval that you need for something that is once an inanimate object to suddenly be have life breathed into them and, you know, a living, breathing toy in this universe, right? Maybe in reality, we don't know, but it's like, because to me, if we're just going from the context of the first story, I would think that the obvious answer would be the toy manufacturing factories that make all of the toys that Andy has in his playpen. Woody, Buzz Lightyear, you know, old or new, all of those toys are just one of many mass-produced toys of that particular model. So it's like, if you were just to look at that, it would be easy to say that, oh, okay, so toy factories are the ones that decide whether or not these toys are actual living, breathing toys, because they're the ones that, you know, they hire people, they have a whole assembly line process, right? Like somebody conceptualizes the toy, and then they have a bunch of people put together the parts, and then it's packaged into whatever box or packaging that it is, and boom, that is that's the point at which it becomes like a full formed toy. But then you have like, you see those rules are bended a little bit with Sid's situation, where he takes apart various toys, and then he places together like mismatching parts of different toys to create new toys. Even that is kind of like, I think you can easily believe or get over that, because those parts that he uses are still like, they originally came from whole toys, which were originally manufactured by those toy factories. So it's like, I think, I don't know if there's other examples of toy creation in the other three movies, but those are like the two main um, examples that I can think of, and they are pretty consistent with each other. So it just seems really out of left field to me that in Toy Story 4, like all of a sudden now this tiny little girl who has barely started preschool, she all of a sudden has the autonomy to breathe life into a toy. Like, I just want to know what is like what is the criteria to actually making a toy? Because I was thinking of what's the old man in Pinocchio who, was he a shoemaker? Just Giuseppe Geppetto, the old man in Pinocchio who made Pinocchio as a puppet. I don't think he was a toy maker. I think Geppetto was a carpenter, right? Or he was a shoemaker? I'm not sure. I think he was a carpenter, hence the wood. So he decided one day to make a wooden puppet, and he like wished every day for that puppet to become a real boy. So it's like, I don't know, what is the criteria? Do you have to be a toy manufacturing factory? Do you have to be a licensed toy making artisan? Or do you have to be someone like Geppetto, who maybe his main trade is not in the making of toys, but at least he does something that is adjacent to that. Like, he's an expert at wood making. So it makes sense that that set of skills that he uses for wood making would also translate to puppet making or whatever. Although ultimately in Pinocchio, the one who decides whether or not Pinocchio is alive boy at the end is obviously the blue fairy. So, that's like, you know what I'm saying, right? I just feel like you have to have some sort of regulation on this thing, or else, like, who's to say where does it end and where does it stop? Like, why? How come? Why was the I almost called him Sporky because that's what he is. But like, why was Forky on his own as a fork, as a spork, when he was just a spork? How come he was not conscious? But all of a sudden, like a 3-year-old girl glues some eyes on him and attaches um a pipe cleaner to him, and she calls that his arms. So now all of a sudden he's a spork. I just don't understand, like, where does it end and where does it begin? That part bothered me all the way up until the end, because, like, especially the parts of Forky trying to hurl himself into the trash and insisting that he did not want to be there. I was like so uncomfortable during those scenes. I know that I'm like overreacting and overcomplicating this, but you got to think about it, right? It's like it's um it's jarring because it's like clearly that's what he wants to be. He wants to be trash. That's what he is. He wants to return to the sea of trash from whence he came, and Woody and the other toys refuse to let him because of, well, it's largely because of Woody's will. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Toy Story 4. It really threw me for a loop. Wow, I did not think that we were gonna go that deep. But well, let me end it on. Let's see. Is there anything else that I can cover? The Annabelle doll. I dead ass don't remember her name. She was so forgettable to me. Hold on. I forgot I have the Wikipedia page open. Oh, Gabi. Okay, so her name is Gabi. Yeah, yeah. Obvious. She. I don't know. She's very, like, I understand. It's they have limited time. It's like a what 90-minute movie. She is obviously supposed to have, like, she's kind of evil in the beginning because she, well, not kind of, she wants to kidnap Woody and take his voice box forcefully. So that's not good. That's not indicative of any good character traits. But then it's like they try to give her this sympathetic tragic villain arc, and she sort of reform. This is my problem with her storyline, right? Even though, like, granted, they did not have time to develop hers to the extent that they developed Woody's and Forky's, because you can't do that in a movie. You have to pick one or two at most. But I just my problem with her storyline is that I just don't feel like she really had any type of truly like a redemption moment that is required in those sort of situations. It's kind of like if she ends up having a happy ending, which is good, I guess, but it's that is as that comes as a direct result of basically Woody's kindness again, which is a lot of things that happen in this movie are because of Woody's kindness or his stubbornness, a combination of the two. Anyway, I just feel like I don't know, Woody's a simp. Like, I don't know what Bo Peep sees in him. He's just okay. What I feel bad for Woody, but it gets tiring to watch a pushover for that long. You know what I mean? It's like you're rooting for them in the first time, maybe the second time, but by the third, fourth time, if he keeps insisting on doing things that are ultimately result in himself being discounted and disrespected over and over again by the very people that he's trying to help, like Bonnie, the Gabi girl, the Gabi doll, who does nothing but treat him and his friends horribly until the moment that, she confesses her whole tragic story to him, and he decides out of the kindness of his heart to give his voice box to her. I don't think that's, again, a good lesson to teach kids, because it's like, yeah, compassion, loyalty is one thing. Those are honorable notions. Those are noble things to strive for, but there comes a point when, number one, you have to have some sort of reciprocity, or number two, even if you decide, because I think the second part with the whole Gabby situation where he's faced with the decision of whether or not to give her his voice box, that comes down to his own personal choice of whether he wants to be like a generous person. But generosity needs to be earned to some extent as well. Or at the very least, it should not like generosity does not mean, accepting someone someone that's treated you horribly and tried to trick you and steal from you. That's essentially what she tried to do. Um, and then all of a sudden, now that you know the reasoning that they had for trying to do that to you, now you feel sympathy. Now you feel sympathy for them, and you want to be generous. That would be like somebody wanting to actually kill me because I don't know. I said something. I called their sister a bitch one day, and that would be like if they sent out a hitman to kill me, and then they canceled it at the last second um, out of their conscience and explained to me like, oh well, this is the reason why I wanted to kill you. I'm not a bad person. It's just that you called my sister a bitch, and um, I find that unacceptable. And so, I should have come to talk to you first, but I ended up sending a hitman to kill you, because I was like caught in the heat of the emotion of the moment. And then that would be like me saying to that person, "Oh, okay, well that's a really that's very understandable, and why don't I just go ahead and lay my life on the line for you now? Like why don't I just go ahead and why don't you let that assassin come to my house and kill me? Because I get it now. I understand your motivations for wanting to do that. Like that's not how gratitude works. Anyway, this movie got a 97% positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm kind of shocked, but kind of not, because everyone knows that movie reviews and critics are rigged, just like everything else in the world. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say about Toy Story. I was going to make an official video about this, but the thought of writing the entire script, and I might still do it actually, because this is kind of fun, and I was kind of all over the place in this live, so maybe I'll private this later, and then maybe I'll make like a proper video with a much more succinct script for what I want to say. Hi TMA and Fukushima-san. Thanks for coming. All right, so I think that's all I have to say about Toy Story. Bo Peep was a badass. She had the right idea all along. What else? Oh yeah, and the two toys from that carnival game, like the two unattractive, well, they weren't unattractive, but they were just not popular toys. They were just plush toys. I forget their names. That was also like that kind of bothered me too, because it's like, again, it comes down to, okay, so if you're not desirable enough as a toy, if you're not attractive or you're not the newest, hottest model, um, you're just not popular, then somehow it's totally justified that none of the kids pick you, and you just have to resign yourself to this life of loneliness and pain from not having a child. Like no, that's not, I don't want that kind of message being spread to young children. Am I the only one who sees this? All right, I better sign off now. Bye. Thanks for listening.